everybody.
Hi, Pam.
Before we get going on tonight's episode, I don't know how many of you had a chance to read last week's column on foxes, and I have to tell you, it skewed way out of my comfort zone very early on. I had this phrase, "all the world's a stage," in my head, and the reason was this yearbook here. This is the 1978 Northerner, which was the Wheaton North High School yearbook. And the yearbook committee chose that part of that soliloquy or monologue or whatever you Shakespeare people call these things from the play As You Like It by William Shakespeare. And so I tried relating foxes, and then this coming week we'll be relating screech owls to that phrase, "all the world's a stage," with the coyotes and the great horned owls taking up the main roles, but in strong supporting roles, we've got our foxes and our screeches. Now, along with that, since I wrote that article, I've actually heard from several more people that are seeing foxes active in the yard. I'm sure with the way the temperature has dropped and we've gotten this much more snow, that they might be even more visible in their habits. So maybe at the end of the talk today, we can see a little bit, see if any of you are seeing foxes in your neighborhood. So with that, I'll keep my yearbook handy in case anybody has any 1978 trivia they want to share, but we'll go ahead and get going with tonight's program. So speaking of the 70s, the wild and crazy looking after the American foxes, we're actually going to not delve into those sorts of foxes tonight. We're going to stick with these, the red foxes, also known as Vulpes vulpes. And if we break that down into its scientific roots, we're going to learn that it is Latin for fox fox. So this is the fox's fox, just the same way the Latin for skunk is Mephitis Mephitis, for stinky stinky. These are the fox's fox. There is quite a bit of research that's been put looking at the source of the red fox in North America. It was for a long time not considered to be native, that it was introduced here when the European settlers came over and they wanted to bring here the tradition of the fox hunt. But there's also some evidence that suggests that through different land bridges and natural formations of that sort, that these the fox actually came here on its own. Regardless of how it got here, it is definitely a part of our local ecosystems, as well as much of the eastern half of the United States has the red fox as one of its, what we would call a mesocarnivore. It's not one of the big guys like a coyote or a coyote or a wolf, but it's certainly doing its part to keep some of our small animal populations under control. Now, there's some confusion, especially monitoring some of the local Facebook pages. There's some confusion about exactly what is a fox and what is a coyote. This graphic, it was kind of small. I tried to find the original version and I couldn't, so I had to blow up a small version from the U.S. APHIS service, the branch of the USDA that does animal and plant health inspection. They're the guys that are actually behind the hawk tagging program that was going on at O'Hare Airport to try and sort out where our hawks are going and trying to actually keep them away from our airports. But anyway, the guys at APHIS had put this graphic together showing a fox with a weight range of anything between 8 and 20 pounds and a height of 12 inches versus a coyote. That weight of 20 to 30 pounds seems a little bit light. They can actually get up in the 40s if they're well-fed or certainly when they're pregnant. And then they compare that to a German Shepherd, which is 85 to 95 pounds. So both of these animals are considerably smaller than some of our pets are. Now, how does this translate to real life? Well, here's a couple of photos. The thing I was always taught to look for if you're trying to figure out if you're looking at a fox or a coyote, and let's face it, sometimes when they're on the move, it can be kind of difficult to discern between the two. A fox, and it is kind of hard to see sometimes, a red fox will usually have a white tip on its tail, and you can see just the faint little hint of a white on the tip of this character here on the left. And a coyote will always have black on its tail. Now, if you've been watching nature long enough, you know that you should never really say the word always, because there's always going to be an exception. But with these two, that is kind of the norm, or what one of the things that you would look for. Sometimes a fox is described as being like a large house cat. Maybe the body size would resemble a cat. They are fairly lean bodied, but look at those long legs. A lot of fox in this area display those long legs that don't contribute much to the weight of the animal, but they do give it a pretty distinctive outline. Both of these animals are exhibiting their winter coats. The fox to me looks like it's a little bit thin, but I don't think it has mange or anything. But the coyote on the right, you've probably seen this picture before. I show it a lot. That was a coyote outside of Hickory Knolls a few years back. It was stalking something there in the snow. But those heavy winter coats can actually make the animal look quite a bit larger than it really is. But foxes are certainly smaller than our local coyotes. And they seem, from what I've been hearing from people, they certainly seem to be very active right now. Now, I called them a small carnivore before, but they're actually considered, well, actually it depends on who's writing the article. Some people call them carnivores just because they do eat meat, but a lot of times they are referred to as omnivores. Their diet really shifts seasonally. Just like when we talked about coyotes a few weeks ago, these animals are going to take what's easiest and what's most plentiful, and also what will give them a good dose of energy, especially in the wintertime. They are going to be taking more in the way of meat. That could be a rabbit or a squirrel that they caught. It could also be some sort of carrion, fresh carrion. They're not fond of carcasses that are old, but the nice thing about wintertime is that if a deer gets hit by a car, it's basically already in the deep freeze, so that meat is going to stay fresh for a while. And fox will come and gnaw away on a downed deer if they come upon one. The other parts of the diet really aren't terribly available. Insects and invertebrates, vegetables, nuts, berries, and fruits. Those are really more of the summer and fall parts of the fox's diet. Now, these were a couple of photos that were sent to me by a reader up in Plato Center, and it actually it was her email that sparked the idea to write about foxes, because right now we're hearing about coyotes. In fact, on WGN yesterday, you guys who know me know I watch an awful lot of Channel 9, and they promoted a report that they were going to do on last night's news between 5 and 7 p.m. I missed the segment, but I did go back to their website and I watched it today. They were interviewing a fellow named, he calls himself Coyote Man. Coyote Man is a fellow named Rob Erickson. He has a company called, I believe it's Scientific Wildlife Management. He and a partner, really, they'll go in and they'll trap nuisance animals. But in the interview and in the promos they played, it really painted coyotes in a bad light. And that made me a little bit fearful for them. They are a part of our local landscape, and I always try to preach coexistence with them. Understanding though that there are some nuisance animals, usually if they're trying to protect a food source, or a little bit later on when they are protecting their young in a den. But most of the coyotes around here tend to den in places that are not likely to be encountered by humans. It's really the activity that gives coyotes a bad name is happening right now, as they're guarding their territories, looking for the young that they'll be raising come April. February, we are in the midst of their mating season right now. So it is peak activity for the coyotes, but it's also peak activity for the foxes because they too have love on their minds. This is what the goal is. These photos were sent to me a few years back. You'll notice in the left-hand photo, these are little kits emerging from a culvert. This is a family that lives just north of Hickory Knolls. And they had for at least a couple years in a row, maybe more than that, the mama fox in that neighborhood would move her kits into that culvert. She didn't, I don't believe she had them there, but I think they moved in there. These photos were taken in May, which would about correlate with an April birth date for these little guys. They look like they're a month or maybe a little bit more than a month old. And that culvert was a great hideout for them. We were in a bit of a, I wouldn't call it a dry spell, but we were having some dry weather, so it wasn't full of water or anything. And the family said that they did hang out there for several days. Cute little things, and not the, they do not cause the disruption. They're not the animals that are apt to attack your pets the way coyotes have the reputation for doing. They're kind of more themselves trying to coexist with us. Now, I don't have the data to back it up, but just from corresponding with people and using my own observations, it seems as though the fox has found a pretty comfortable niche in the neighborhoods. Now I live here in St. Charles, just 7 blocks west of the river, and we'll have the occasional coyote stroll through the neighborhood. I saw that one a little over a month ago, but it's the foxes that seem to be the residents. I know over on Prairie Street here in St. Charles, there was a backyard shed that used to get foxes raising their young underneath it. Near Haynes Middle School, there was a den there in under the porch of an abandoned house. So they'll find ways like that where they will sometimes make their presence known. I remember I had a friend who was out of the country for about 3 weeks, and he came back to find foxes playing on his deck outside of his house because they had moved in while he and his wife were traveling. But I kind of look at them, if we've got the town mouse and the country mouse, these guys are definitely the town, more town oriented. Now, we do have with the coyotes, you'll see, pictures of them strolling around in Chicago and places like that. They certainly are, coyotes certainly are a part of our urban and suburban landscapes too, but the foxes just seem to be our friendly neighborhood meso predators. One more little glamour shot of the 3 kits from that particular litter. And then this photo, this was sent by Bill and Kathy Swedberg, just as a note, with a note saying that this was one of the parents of a litter of foxes that were raised in the backyard underneath, I believe you said a spruce tree. look at it's just a quintessential alert fox. Animal's looking a little lean, probably because it's been busy providing food for that litter of youngsters, but just really a neat looking animal, and one that will be every bit as active as the coyotes, but it's the coyotes who are grabbing the headlines right now. So keep an eye out for them. Let me know if you see them. Now, meanwhile, while the mammals are doing their thing, the reptiles and the amphibians are doing theirs too, primarily trying to survive. Now, this is an image from U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They had a video called "Snapping Turtles Under Ice," and the video actually shows this this turtle moving, which is contrary to how we think that turtles should be spending the winter. Now, if this water that this turtle was in was frozen solid from top to bottom, then the turtle might have a little harder time surviving. But because the ice was thick enough for people to walk on, that's how the part of the video shows some boots as the person was walking and filming this moving snapping turtle. But they certainly can't come up for air when their pond is got ice across the top of it. And again, if it was frozen solid, they'd be in an oxygen depletion mode and they might not survive. We do occasionally, I know here in the Park District, a couple of times we've had ponds that have frozen solid, and then we've had to respond to calls in the springtime of stinky fish and stinky turtles because they were not able to make it through without, because all the water was bound up in ice, and therefore all the oxygen was not available either. So what's going on with these turtles is a little phenomenon. The official term would be cloacal respiration. The unofficial term is butt breathing. There's a little diagram here that shows, I think a few weeks ago, we might have mentioned that term cloaca. Sometimes it's called the vent. Both reptiles and amphibians and birds will have this cloacal structure. It's kind of the all-purpose chute. Somebody calls it the Swiss Army knife of orifices, but it's where everything comes out. The urates, the feces, eggs, if it's an egg-laying animal. Well, there's also inside of, in this case, a snapping turtle, there's this area here, and the turtle is able to pump these bursa here. And the inside of these muscles here are lined with these little filaments that are the blood supply there is very rich, and they can actually take up oxygen. There's a gas exchange that goes on there. So by contracting those muscles in and up and down, they're creating a flow of water in and out through that back door there, and they are actually able to take in oxygen from the water. Now, it's not a lot of oxygen, but it's enough. Their activity levels are going to be much lower when they're in cold water and they're under ice. It's not mean they're completely immobile, but they're in a state of what's called brumation, which is like the reptile equivalent of hibernation. And so by not having a lot of activity requirements, they're also not having to have a lot of oxygen need. This is also a reason that when there is movement, there can be some lactic acid that builds up in their muscles because of kind of an oxygen depletion mode that they're in. So in springtime, a lot of times you'll see snapping turtles emerging pretty early on in the springtime. It might even be still kind of cold out, but they got to get out and get some air into those lungs so that they can, their body isn't just one giant muscle cramp. But anyway, next time you see a snapping turtle, you can think of how it was that they survived the winter. It's thanks to that cloacal respiration that they're able to do. Now, we're going to take a look at frogs in the snow. We've just talked about turtles under the ice. Now, our frogs, believe it or not, they are sometimes active even when there's snow on the ground. Now, night like this, when it's something 0 or below out, no, this isn't good frogging weather. But if we get to, a warm spell, as we so often do in February, we'll have snow on the ground, but the temperature will be up above freezing. That can inspire some movement. And the picture you're looking at here is actually from, some of you might remember Mary O. She was the founder of the Naturalist Department here at the Park District. And she snapped this picture on a warm winter's day. She believes this might have been a bullfrog that hopped up out of the water, went on a little bit of a walkabout, and then went back in again. This does make the frogs vulnerable to predation, but it can also help them get access to oxygen. Maybe the pond that this frog was in was having some depleted oxygen levels, and it had to get out and get some air in its little lungs too. Frogs, this is one of 3 winter survival strategies we're going to look at. These large frogs, and in our area, that would be the bullfrog and the green frog. They go under the water. Sometimes we say, oh, they're burrowed down in the mud. It might not be actually in the mud. They might just be at the bottom on the substrate of whatever the body of water is, whether it's the Fox River or a tributary or a retention pond. But they're allowing oxygen to diffuse into their body through their skin. That's, some of you have been on field trips with me. You know, I always try to say, remind people to not handle frogs a whole lot. Their skin is very, I guess you'd call it porous. It's very apt to getting clogged up if we get the oils from our hands, or in the summertime, if we've got bug spray or sunscreen on our hands, that can really mess up an amphibian's skin. And it's very important certain times of the year that that oxygen that's in the water is able to diffuse into the frog's body. So that's winter survival strategy A, is to let the oxygen come into the skin. Now, I mentioned predation. What you're looking at there on the left, that's a mink snacking on a frog. This was I remember reading this article years ago, and when I looked it up again, I saw that it was all the way back in 2009. And for one, I was kind of proud of myself that I could remember something from that long ago, and 2, that I was able to find it. But I really urge you to check this this blog out. There's a gentleman named Carl Strang. I've mentioned him before too. He produces every year the field to local singing insects. He travels throughout the Chicago region listening and making notes and recordings of most of our orthopterans, our grasshoppers and our crickets, but also cicadas and things like that. Well, anyway, Carl has a blog called Nature Inquiries. And on the left here, he said, back in 2009, I came across some fresh mink tracks and they were unusual. Can you see why? So there they are. And I remember looking at them thinking, well, they look kind of curvy. I wonder if that had something to do with it. And it didn't. What it was that this mink he said it was in the diagonal walk gait, which means it's taking steps. Normally when mink walk, they bound. And here in another article, he posted these pictures of these tracks. So by bounding, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, hop, 1, 2, 3, 4. So and if you've ever seen a mink move, you know, they almost look like a slinky. They've got that long curved, humped back body, and they kind of bound along. That's what would be considered their normal gait. But the tracks that Carl found, the the mink was taking slower steps, and it was taking steps, it wasn't bounding. And he noted too that there's some drag marks. So it could be that this animal was carrying something. Well, sure enough, he followed it, and there was a little hole, and this is such a typical mink behavior. They'll take one bite of something and then they'll cache the rest. So here's the back legs of the frog. The front legs are here. The head is kind of buried, if it's still even there. But that mink had, on a warm winter's day, found a frog. So that winter survival strategy doesn't do you much good if you come out too soon and you're moving kind of slowly and you get nabbed by a mink. But it is an interesting phenomenon that does occur from time to time, where you can actually find frog tracks in the snow. Here's Carl's information down here, Nature Inquiries. It's a WordPress blog that he has, and there's his name there, Carl Strang. He's retired from the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County. He was a naturalist there for, oh gosh, decades. But he has some very insightful writings that you can check out there on his blog. Now, this is Winter Survival Strategy B, and this is for our more terrestrial amphibians, which in this case would be our American toads. They want to dig down deep enough that they avoid freezing. Now, this little guy, he chose the compost pile at Hickory Knolls, and I was giving it one last turn before winter, and I accidentally turned him up. So I buried him again. Hopefully he was able to get down deep enough that he was able to survive the winter. I did go back and look for him in the spring, and I found a toad-sized tunnel, and I followed it down. I never found the toad, but I also didn't see any signs that he had been dug up. So my hope is that this toad did survive and then emerged once it got a little bit warmer in the springtime. But digging down deep enough to avoid freezing is something that that's how our toads will make it through the winter. Now, they may dig themselves if the substrate is soft enough, like it was here in the compost, or they may opt for following, say, a chipmunk burrow or something like that and going down. I remember I used to correspond sometime with a family out near Fisherman's Inn. So what would that be? Elburn, Illinois, out near Route 47 and Main Street. And they had, it's funny, the wife called it her little family of toads. She said, here's the mama, and here's the daddy, and here's the baby. It was like 4 or 5 toads though. And they had come down into her well, and they would sit in the window well. There was glass, there was a window facing from the basement to the window well, and the toads would enter there from what was probably a chipmunk burrow. Well, she would feed them. So all winter long, she would go to the pet store, and she'd buy, and she'd feed this little family of toads that were overwintering in the window well. That window happened to be the window of the furnace room in her basement, so it might have been just a little bit warmer, but they were actually active enough to be feeding all winter long. And just kind of a fun little story, another little spin on winter survival strategy. That could be survival strategy B, Roman numeral 1, finding a warm window well to hang out in where you get fed every week. But anyway, that's what our terrestrial frogs will do. And then we've got these guys here. This is a little chorus frog. This photo was taken a little over a year ago. It was Groundhog Day last year out at Nelson Lake Marsh. The temperature that day was 49 degrees. Now you can see we still had snow on the ground, and I recall we had snow for a while after that. But this is a little chorus frog, and it no doubt woke up and thought, oh gosh, I better get moving. If it's this warm, it must be springtime, must be time to get to the pond. These frogs have winter survival strategy C, which is what I call the freeze thaw method. in their body, they actually have a couple of different protective physiological processes that kick in. One, they are able to there's some protein structures in between their cells. And those protein structures gather the water that's in the cells, in between the cells, the intracellular space or intercellular space. So it's not in the cells itself, but the water that's there will form crystals along these protein structures, and there's enough space in between the cells for these ice crystals to expand, and the cells don't burst because the ice is forming outside of them. Meanwhile, inside the cells, there's like a sugar and alcohol mixture that forms, and it's basically like an antifreeze, which is just a really long way of saying that these little tiny frogs can actually freeze and then thaw and be okay because their cells are protected by those two internal mechanisms. So chorus frogs and spring peepers, wood frogs are kind of famous for that too. We don't really see wood frogs in Kane County, but they are actually the earliest frogs to emerge and head to the breeding ponds. So they all adopt this freeze thaw method of getting through the winter. Now, speaking of getting through the winter, we do have a fair number of animals that migrate, birds that migrate. And I was so interested to get this text today that some of you know James Frediani. He was in our KCCN classes a few years back. Well, James works in Batavia, and he actually looked out on the Fox River. He works for the city of Batavia. And this is the Fox River near the water treatment plant. And he took this photo on the left and he said, "Can you see what I see?" So what I saw was a bunch of geese, but then look here in the kind of like the middle right part of the middle of the photo. I tried to zoom in on it here. 1, 2, 3 tall birds with curved necks, rusty feathers on the back. There are 3 sandhill cranes in the river in Batavia. And this was just this morning that he saw this. And James is pretty observant. He sees all kinds of cool things on that stretch of river. And because that's where the treated water flows from the plant there in downtown Batavia, it doesn't tend to freeze. There's a lot of nutrients there, so there's a lot of food. So you'll get ducks and geese and things like that congregating there. Well, lo and behold, here were these 3 sandhill cranes. And he asked me, he said, "Is this typical?" He said, "I don't usually see them in the water. And 2, this time of year, they're usually not around here." Well, when he said, you know, they didn't migrate, that reminded me of a story. And I had to dig around a little bit until I found it again. But this was, this would be 2 years ago down in Will County. There was, you guys, maybe you heard about these 2, Abel and Mabel? This was a pair of sandhill cranes along the Old Plank Road Trail, which is part of the Will County Forest Preserve system. Abel, the male, he must have gotten injured in some way. He could fly, but he couldn't fly very high and he couldn't fly very far. And so when the rest of the sandhill cranes left, Mabel, his mate, opted to stay with him as opposed to leaving and migrating with the other cranes. And the folks up at the International Crane Foundation up in Baraboo said that it's not unheard of for sandhill cranes to overwinter and not migrate, but it is kind of unusual. You can see they've got a lot of feathers in. As we so often say, when birds migrate, it's not because of the temperature so much as it is the availability of food. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe here, these cranes that are in Batavia, if maybe they opted to stay. Now they could have just decided, hey, we're not going anywhere. because we don't want to. Migration is stressful. We're just going to stick around. But I'm kind of wondering if maybe there was another reason. And the fact that there's three, it might be mama, papa, and baby. Maybe this was sometimes when cranes will lose one clutch of eggs. They usually lay 2 eggs, and if something happens, if those eggs get predated and there's enough time, they will try again. And I sort of wonder if maybe this was a late arrival and they didn't think the baby was going to be able to fly that far, so they opted to stick around. I'm just kind of spitballing here. It could be that they, like I said, they just have found that they don't have to because there's plentiful food. They're probably catching crayfish and things. Crayfish are can be a pretty large part of their diet, although they usually hunt the burrowing crayfish on land as opposed to the aquatic ones. But anyway, don't know how long they're going to be there. James is going to keep an eye out. I hope to get down there and look for them too. But anyway, right now, if you want to see, there's or at least today, there were 3 sandhill cranes by the water treatment plant in Batavia. So I've also been hearing a lot about deer, and kind of always in the context of all the deer, like almost like too many deer. And I thought it might be kind of fun to take a look at take a historic view of the deer population here in Illinois. Well, this turned out to be just a giant rabbit hole. When I started trying to dig around and find, what I was looking for was a nice, neat little graph that showed we had an estimated, this many deer in the 1700s prior to European settlement. And then we had this many deer in the 1800s, and we had this many deer in the early 1900s. I couldn't find a nice, neat graph like that. What I did find was this graph. And the gentleman who put this together, I actually found this graph in another website called Deer Friendly. And it just kind of didn't really seem like necessarily a scientific or science-based website. It seemed a little bit more like an advocacy website, although there wasn't anything overtly saying we must save all the deer. But where I found this graph, which lists the sources of how he made it, was in a paper that he wrote. Here he's listed as being at the San Jose State University. He's now with, I believe, the University of Pennsylvania. But anyway, he did put this graph together, and you'll notice that it's not Illinois specific. This is the U.S. deer population, and it's not even specific to whitetails, which is the sort of deer that we have here. It also includes mule deer, black-tailed deer, and other, which I'm assuming is like the little key deer and things like that from down in Florida. But it does kind of mirror what I was able to find in text form, that we had a lot of deer, and then there was, through a lack of conservation laws and overhunting and habitat destruction, all those things that always cause a decline in numbers of species, the deer population plummeted. I did see a figure of 500 deer in Illinois in, let's see, I believe it was in 1940. But believe it or not, for all the times that we're today hearing about, oh, we have, there's too many deer, there's too many deer vehicle collisions, there's deer ticks are spreading Lyme disease. And by the way, there's a whole, deer are not the main part of the deer tick life cycle. It actually has more to do with our little paramiscus mice, the white-footed mice. But deer are the big vessels that the ticks can hang out on. But anyway, I digress. We went from having a bunch of deer to not having very many deer to then, through conservation laws and putting, having hunting seasons and having limits on the number of deer that you can take, to actually reaching a point where, the numbers got almost back to their historic levels. In fact, the whitetail population has for a while exceeded where we were prior to European settlement. Now, what this gentleman contends is that the deer population in the United States is declining. There's a few diseases. There's a hemorrhagic disease. There's chronic wasting disease. There's things, and then also they still have habitat loss and things like that. So he maintains that the deer population is declining. But this particular paper, Searching the Internet to Estimate Deer Population Trends, that was actually a paper that he wrote on the difficulty in finding consistent sources for numbers. So anyway, what I wanted, like I said, this turned out to be just this giant rabbit hole that I fell down into as I was putting this slide together. The population was high, and then it was low, and now it's back up again. When I look in some of our forest preserves and I see the amount of browsing that's going on and the way the deer are just munching their way up the sides of like a stand of cedar or juniper trees, or I see where they've mowed down a field of grasses, I know we've got a lot of deer, at least locally. And it just is hard to believe that as little as 100 years ago, there were virtually none around here. So it shows what population management and conservation laws can do to bring a population back. I'm curious to see where this graph is going to go in the future, if it's going to continue to go downward, because right now, everybody that I've talked to, our own restoration ecologists and those in other agencies say, yeah, we've got a lot, almost too many deer right now. This was a photo that was sent to me by a reader out in DeKalb. She says that this little troop goes through her backyard pretty much every day. Deer in populated areas like this will head for yards where they know there might be, say, bird feeders, where there's landscape plants that are easy to feed on. Deer will also deer will sometimes have their fawns in neighborhoods like this, because they know that there's a better degree of protection if their little darling is nestled up against the side of a house, or there's just a little kind of not really predator free, but there is an enhanced degree of safety when you're in amongst houses like this. Now, here in St. Charles, there was a resident who had actually lodged a complaint against the city, alleging that there is disease transmission going on, that the deer are spreading deer ticks, that there is a hazard to public safety because of all the deer in vehicle collisions that are occurring. Well, a little over a month ago, the city has decided that there's no need to institute any sort of deer management policy within the city limits. The police chief especially said he wasn't about to, allow people to go around hunting and shooting in neighborhoods, which was something that I guess had been suggested, a lethal means of control. But they said that there's about 1,000 vehicle accidents a year in town, and 5 or fewer are caused by deer. I thought that was an interesting statistic. So even though it seems like we've got a lot of deer, there's not enough that the city, at least the city of St. Charles, feels as though they need to do anything in the form of deer management. Now, I'm going to stop the share in a minute because there's something here. We're going to do a little opening. What do they call it? Unboxing, unpackaging, reveal. But before we stop that, I want to give you a heads up for next week. We're going to go back to round 2 of All the World's a Stage. And instead of the big dynamic presence of the great horned owl, we're going to look behind them to see what our eastern screech owls have been up to. We've got some more fun signs in the snow that we're going to look at. We're going to take a look at a Ice Age mammal called a stag moose and find out why they're relevant and important. Got some more fun reader emails, and who knows what kind of late breaking nature news we'll have by next week at this time. So with that, I'm going to stop the share. And I'm going to show you what we're going to open. So I got this in the mail today. I've almost forgotten I'd sent away for it. Not that it was that long ago. It was like, maybe a couple of weeks ago or so. But this is from the Isaak Walton League. And they were launching a citizen science, actually, I think we're supposed to say community science effort aimed at looking at salt levels in local waterways. So they said, go ahead and send away for our free kit. Well, here it is. It's arrived in this envelope here, our Salt Watch monitoring kit. So I thought it might be fun for us to take a look at this. And then if you're so inspired, you might want to send away for one as well. Okay, so here it is. Here's the promo card, participate in Winter Salt Watch. Looks like you have to download an app on your phone, the Water Reporter app on your smartphone, create your account, find the Isaak Walton League and follow that group. So I guess you just take this kit. There's chloride test strips in here. So you take this kit out. I'm not gonna, you think I should open it too? May as well. Says to find a small glass or plastic cup using water from a stream. Rinse out your cup 3 times. Fill the cup with about 1 inch of stream water. And then place the chloride test strip into the cup with the label at the top. Hold on. I guess you leave the strip sitting in the cup until the horizontal orange line at the top turns dark blue or black, up to 10 minutes. Oh, look at this. Okay, these are our chloride test strips. Hold the strip on the reverse side of this card, snap a picture, upload your picture to the Water Reporter. Great job. To read the test strip, locate where the tip of the white peak falls on the scale. Okay, so here is the scale that you match your test strips to. I don't know, I just thought this was kind of a neat thing, and it sounds like it's pretty easy to do. Now with our burst of cold, you might have to be kind of careful approaching a stream. You don't want to walk out on a thin little ice shelf. You want to make sure you can get to the water safely. But chlorides in our water is kind of a big deal right now. And I have to be honest, I do get a little nervous over the great quantities of salt that we use here at the Park District. A couple of years back, we looked at some alternative methods for de-icing, and there were 2 problems with it. One, the newer chemicals were also the more expensive chemicals, and 2, the equipment that we have, the salt spreaders that we have on our trucks, that's what they do, and we would have to upgrade our fleet in order to be able to spread these newer materials. I am actually part of the city's Natural Resources Commission, and I know it comes up with the city of St. Charles from time to time. Are we using the most cutting edge methods for minimizing the amount of ice on the roadways, and also keeping things safe, but also keeping things safe for the river as well. So as the city learns new things, I try to take those to the Park District, but I also know we've got an awful lot of salt in our waterways, and it does affect things from our tiniest little non-game fish species and our freshwater mussels on up the food chain. So anyway, if you would like to send away for your own Isaak Walton League of America Salt Watch kit, you can probably go to their website. And if you can't find it, shoot me an email, And I'd be glad to send you more information on this, but this seemed like it was an easy thing to do and could be give us some insights. I'll keep you posted if I'm able to get out and do this. I'll let you know what I was able to find out. But anyway, that's what I had for tonight. With that, looks like we've got some noted in the chat. Okay, so Mary, over on the east side of St. Charles, you have a red fox that visits the yard in Surrey Hill. And several years ago, you had a den there. Fox come through in late afternoon, hides in the large cedar trees. They used to be in Delnor Woods, and now they're not because the coyotes have taken over. That's interesting. I know that for a while there was a coyote that was hanging out in Delnor Woods, kind of observing everything. So and that is very true, Mary. If when the coyotes move in, foxes move out, and if the foxes don't move out, then the coyotes will kind of apply some muscle. You know, a couple of years ago at Hickory Knolls, we had what amounted to border wars. The foxes, I think, were trying to reclaim some of their former territory in our natural area, and the coyotes weren't having it. They actually killed 2 foxes, and when a coyote kills a fox, they'll oftentimes leave the remains as a message to the other foxes of, hey, you know what, this is our turf, you guys go on. In fact, bear with me here a second. I believe I have the where did it go? There it is. I actually came across one of the skulls. I went back to find it, and it was gone. And so this was, if you're familiar with Hickory Knolls, we have an area called Water Tower Hill. This skull, there was that's where the fox was killed. I went back to see if I could find the skull, and it was gone. Well, I found this over near the fence for the boys' home. It looks like something, maybe this almost looks like an owl beak here and here, picked it up and flew it away and dropped it. I found it at the base of a tree. But anyway, yeah, coyotes and foxes don't mix. So if the foxes stick around too long, the coyotes are going to make sure that they get rid of them one way or another. Kay says that I definitely saw a sandhill crane on December 29th flying above Peck Farm. Okay, so and that is pretty late. I think I told you guys, I always will mentally I mark when Sandhill cranes should be on the move by when our Park District Christmas lunch is. We usually have it the second Friday in December, and every time I've gone to that Christmas lunch, except for this year because they had to bring it to us because we couldn't all sit together. So as I was sitting here eating my Smitty's sandwich for Christmas lunch this year, I heard the Sandhill cranes. But that second Saturday in December is usually when they're getting, the last few big waves are moving through. So December 29th, that's kind of late. And Kay, was it just one Sandhill crane that you saw?
That's correct.
Just one. Okay. Yeah. I wonder if maybe it is part of that trio that was seen there in Batavia.
And I usually keep a close eye on them, and to see them on the 29th, like you said, that was way late.
That's almost why bother.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Anybody else have any Sandhill crane observations or fox observations or?
Yeah, Pam, it's Kim.
Oh, Kim.
Greg and I saw some flying over Johnson's Mound just about, I'm thinking 3 weeks ago. There were about 10 of them flying south.
Ah, okay.
That was because, their sound is so distinctive. We were just really surprised. So that we just thought that really seemed really odd. So
yeah. So yeah, because that would have been in January. Even.
It was January. Yeah.
And granted, we have had fairly mild conditions. But again, it's not just temperature that drives them And you know, I think that there's parts to the migration story that we just don't quite have figured out yet, because, well, I know there's actually quite a bit of mystery surrounding how, you know, especially our long distance migrators, how in the world do they get down to South America without ever having been there before? And then, you know, flying back and forth year after year. There's a lot to that story I think we still need to understand. And you know, the thinking is that it's not food. I mean, it's food, it's not temperature that drives these migrations. But you know, maybe like the three in Batavia, maybe they are perfectly able-bodied and they're just opting not to move. We'll have to see if they keep sticking around and if we see more starting to stick around. I had said a few years ago, I kind of wondered if our Sandhill cranes were the next Canada goose, because we went from having none, in fact, they were an endangered species in Illinois, to them showing up in an awful lot of places. And, you know, just as today, there's a lot of people who aren't fond of Canada geese, I wonder if we're going to get to that point with cranes, if they can get kind of obnoxious when they're you know, defending a territory or they're raising their young, they can charge at you. I know I had a woman call me one time and say that our as in Park District, Sandhill crane had broken a pane of glass at her house because it had walked over from a park and was, you know, tapping and tapped so hard that it broke. So I don't know, you know, if we'll get to that point or not, but if it'll be interesting to see in the coming years if we have more and more of these animals sticking around, or if it was just this isolated pair or trio that's sticking around this one time. We'll have to wait and see. Anybody else?
Pam, I was just wondering, hi, do we ever get any gray foxes around here?
Well, you know, that's a great question. I've never seen or heard of any. I keep hoping that one will turn up, kind of in the same way I was hoping for badgers, and now we seem to find badgers, I wouldn't say frequently, but we know they're around. The last time I remember reading about gray foxes, and it wasn't in Kane County, it was a cemetery on the south side of Chicago that had a population of gray foxes. Remember when Chicago Wilderness used to have that magazine they put out, beautiful magazine, and they actually profiled that little family group of gray foxes that were living in the cemetery. And I remember asking somebody with the Forest Preserve District, whatever happened with those gray foxes? The coyotes moved in and foxes are gone. Yeah, so I don't know if they are as, I don't know, what you call it, secretive or furtive as our red foxes are. The gray foxes are 10 times that amount. Okay. So yeah, I haven't heard. Sure like to think that maybe we would be able to see them someday, but I don't even know what their population is in Illinois.
I just remember probably about, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, I don't know who I heard it from. Somebody in the Park District probably saying that there had been a few in where Timber Trails Park would be.
Oh, but, really?
Yeah, but I can't remember who I heard that from, and it was quite a while ago. So.
Oh, well, you know, I remember, and this was, gosh, probably 15 or more years ago. I remember somebody telling me that they thought they saw a gray fox dead alongside of Randall Road. So I, of course, hopped in the car and went to check it out, and there wasn't anything there. So I don't know, you know, if it's a gray fox and somebody scooped it up right away, or if our county highway crews scooped it up and, you know, it wasn't. I never was able to confirm that one either. Okay. But, maybe I'll do a little digging on that. We'll do a little thing. And folks, for those of you who aren't familiar with gray foxes, they're they are not a vulpes, or they're not even that genus vulpes. They're Eurocyan, I believe, is the genus. They're a tree climbing and sometimes tree dwelling little animal that has a semi-retractable claws on their feet so they can climb. And I know some parts of the country, they're still fairly common. I know this is the Southwest. I've had people tell me they see them out there fairly regularly, but yeah, maybe we'll do a little spotlight on gray foxes and I'll see what I can find out as to how they're doing in Illinois or in the Midwest.
That would be awesome. Thanks, Pam.
Let me make a note. So, thanks, Laura. All right. Anything else tonight? No, well, I gotta say, folks, I am kind of digging this weather. I know it's cold. I bundled up. I walked to work. Gonna walk home tonight. But please do stay warm. Remember Sarah, I think you're the one that quotes Eddie Bauer, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing choices. If you do go out, make sure you cover up. When I walk, I've got a neck gaiter that comes up to about here. My hat comes down to about here. So I'm well suited to dealing with the cold, but please be careful if you do go out. Streets are pretty empty tonight. I know that, but you take care and I will look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thanks, Pam.
Rest of your week.
Bye,
Okay.
Pam. Thank
Pam.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot,
Pam.
Pam. Stay warm.
Take care.
Great. Thank you.